Sure. At least from an HR perspective, we collect a lot of data across the employee life cycle. Some of the data comes in through when a candidate applies for a job. Others are collected while their time at a particular organization, like through performance management, through promotions, through engagement survey data. So that can create a lot of clutter. And so unless you organize it or really describe the intent of what you're trying to solve for, it can be quite challenging. In my experience, I've sort of relied upon Deloitte's interpretation of human capital management when it comes to data. They have proposed that really you want to measure with more intently about what you're trying to actually solve for. So that can include across the HR functional employee lifecycle, you have onboarding, you have talent development and talent management, is to pick the 3 or 4 metrics that either inform or drive an action. And those sort of metrics really drive to an organizational health data set that you can really derive how well an organization is operating. What's the employee experience look like? Are they productive? Are they driving growth or product or service improvement? So really, I guess to boil it down to just a couple of sentences or to sum it up, it's really how do I understand how the organization is performing and what are the key metrics that help me do that? If you don't have a reason, I think you have to interpret for your own organization what data is important for you to measure organizational health, so the productivity, level of service and engagement of the employees. And for every organization, that can be different. If the data is not, you're collecting is not meant to inform on actions or really drive actions or really give any insights into how well an organization is performing or evolving or changing or transforming, then you don't need it. So you have to be mindful of if I'm collecting it, what's the use case for it? I don't have a particularly favorite recipe. I do appreciate the consistency of looking at each of the HR functional areas as its own bucket of information. So rather than spreading across each of the functional areas and just sort of saying, well, we need to collect X or Y, it's being intentional about each of the functional areas. So for example, in talent acquisition, time to fill a role is a key metric. How long does it take for you to find and interview and offer and have that candidate offer a job at your organization? How long does that take? And I'll take it even one step further. Some roles are harder to find than others. For example, an artificial intelligence or machine learning engineer is a much harder skill set to find. So you can't just take an average across your organization. It takes 90 days to fill a role. You should be breaking it down into, hey, for my engineering roles or for my business roles, like your general and administrative roles, those numbers can be different. And so you should develop baselines based on the functional area of your business. Yeah, I think from an HR perspective, the themes that I see currently are focused on leveraging AI in 2 areas. One is in the talent acquisition platform space. So that is job description creation. It's using AI to either help you build job description that you can turn into a job requisition. It looks for biases in job description language, which can be incredibly helpful, and can also help you source and filter out candidates that maybe are not qualified, don't have the skills and competencies for the role. I think the second area where I've seen AI development that can be quite useful is in around the people analytics space. So if you're marrying up data sets, say for example, you have a best of breed approach to your HR technology platform, you're using applicant tracking system, you're using a different HR information system tool, you're using a different tool that manages performance, is marrying up that data to then analyze And where AI comes in is what are the insights that can be particularly noticeable in those data sets so you don't have to take the manual approach. I might be coming in with a bias opinion and maybe looking at data through biases. How does AI look at the data in those data sets, perhaps propose actions to take in order to remediate? So that can be particularly helpful and also can accelerate your ability to analyze the data that you have at your fingertips. When I think about employee engagement in Catalyst, in my experience, it centers around an organization's mission, vision, and values. Is the organization that splashes these mission, vision, values across a careers page, for example, are they living and breathing that every single day? And there's an authenticity to the most successful organizations where it's embedded in the culture, it's embedded in the ways of working. So I think Dave Ulrich came up with the term, he defines culture as the ways of working. To me, that makes a lot of sense. If an organization embeds the mission, vision, values of that organization's sort of ethos into the way they interact with each other, the way they cross-functionally work together, the way they prioritize work, the way they measure productivity and success, that can be pretty powerful. If there's a disconnect, then that can be a challenge. So a mission, vision, values is what a company stands for. Operating principles are, if they're properly defined, is how an organization works. And if it's embedded in the day-to-day work, then that's something that really resonates and comes through in engagement surveys, really comes through in how an organization can be successful, or it really highlights opportunities that need to be addressed. Yeah, this is, to be transparent, I haven't seen it in my experience yet. It depends on how well the AI data model or the AI is operating. You have to train the data model to look for, like I said, biases or to ensure inclusivity or equitability in particular roles. So it depends on the model. If the model is operating as it should, and something I mentioned earlier, for example, is it can take a look at a job description and ensure that the language in the job description, for example, is gender neutral. Is it using sort of masculine terms that may prevent broader array of candidates from applying for that role? Thinking about how do I ensure that I'm casting a wide enough net based on the skills and competencies that I'm really seeking out and not putting anyone off. If someone's got the skills and competencies to fill that role, I want to have that candidate apply for the job, regardless of their. It's going to take work. It's going to take those data models to become very, very smart. And it requires effort on an organization's perspective. It really requires the developers of those AI tools to take customer feedback and to inform on how they can make the data model that much smarter. If there's challenges, you need to pivot quickly with the AI model. You don't want to use that as your only source of filtering out candidates, as an example. You still need that human interaction to understand and ensure that you're getting the right candidates for the role. And I liken it to sort of business process. If you have a very laborious manual business process and you just automate that, all you're doing is automating a bad process. You have to ensure that you are improving the business process if you're going to leverage automation to do that. So that could be, reducing the number of steps, reducing the number of touch points, maybe having the business process in some areas work in parallel with one another and not relying on sort of the sequential step. I liken it to the same thing with AI. You need the feedback. You need to improve the model at every opportunity. In past experiences, a transparent interviewing process where the candidate knows upfront exactly what the steps of the process are is incredibly helpful and informative. 2 is using a structured interviewing process. That means it's having a standard question bank. It's having a really diverse interview loop or interview panel that is conducting the interviews. It has a unbiased and blind scoring or evaluation process. It has a robust debrief opportunity where the panel can come together and discuss a candidate's evaluation based on the skills and competencies of the job. And then there has to be a way to have a discourse on what's the best path forward and ensuring that the candidate knows at every step of the way where they stand for that particular role. I think the worst experience that I have seen is when a candidate doesn't know where they stand in the process or has gone through the interview process and promised that they will either have a follow-up on a certain date and time, and then they receive no information and they're left sort of isolated and not sure what's the next step. So clear transparency, structured interviewing, robust debriefs, and to remove biases in the process.